Off the back of the largest gatherings of CEOs in Cape Town last week at the YPO Edge event, we speak to an American money manager for his views on South Africa Inc. and to find out what's holding back investment flows into the country. Anthony Ginsberg is the managing director of GinsGlobal Index Funds, and he joins me to tell me why investors are taking a wait-and-see approach. What's with the apprehension, Anthony?
Well, Karabo, it's great to see you. Thank you for having me. It was inspiring last week. We had some wonderful speakers, including the President of South Africa and Trevor Noah as well. The truth is, the foreign CEOs who came, there were 27,000 members in YPO, of which 3,000 came to Cape Town. There's a lot of goodwill, man, towards South Africa.
Show it.
And the truth is, they say, Aish, when is this election going to be over? Because they're waiting for the election to pass. I think then hopefully the money will begin to flow. But there are some tough decisions, man. They saw the budget. They were discussing with some of the leadership that this Eskom issue is really worrying, because, I mean, it adds about 10% to the debt. And your debt basically since 2009 has doubled from 30% of GDP to 60%. And now people are saying, goodness, are we going to do more bailouts, or is this going to be done in 3 to 4 years? So they are waiting.
Ultimately, when you look at Africa, especially the two biggest economies, I mean, Nigeria, just off the throes of elections, and according to the opposition, the fight is not done there. South Africa is marching towards the May election. How long will investments continue to hold our economy hostage? I mean, what do you need? What kind of economic reforms do you really need to see in the East so that you give us a glowing reference just as much as you give the eastern part of the continent?
Man, look, I was born here. I'm positive about South Africa. I actually think there's a lot of good things we could be doing. Frankly, there's a lot of goodwill overseas towards South Africa, on Wall Street, in London. I think our envoys and our government should reach out to the South African diaspora. I don't know if many of my fellow or ex-countrymen even know who our ambassador is in Washington or in London. There's a lot more profile raising that could be done. And there are good things happening, but there are some bold changes that probably are needed. Whether it's on the SOE front, that's not the main thing. People want to see economic growth. And they're worried that this downward spiral of no GDP growth beyond 2%, I think for almost 4 years running now, the growth has been below 2%. And they're comparing us to Rwanda. I hosted a panel for YPO on East Africa versus West Africa. And East Africa, even compared to South Africa, East Africa is getting all the news. Ethiopia is getting all the news.
And why? Why is that?
Man, because when you've got no GDP growth in South Africa since 2007, that was beyond 5%, it's not a headline number.
East Africa is also from a low base. It really had to work itself to where it is now, and it's taken the community as such. How much of the Zimbabwe story, for instance, is a growth drag on SADC's
No, it's a very good question. I will tell you that the reason the East Africans are getting a lot of attention is because they have this free trade area. The customs union there has basically been cut so that what happens is you can trade much more freely. Import, exports, they are trading much more between Uganda, Tanzania,
between you
Kenya.
and I, apparently Africa is trying to do exactly that. It's trying to establish an all-continental free trade area. But only the big daddy, in this case, Nigeria, has not even bothered to look through the papers. No signature, no nothing, no ratification. Is this just a pipe dream?
It's not a pipe dream. The FTA, the Free Trade Area of Africa, is a tremendous idea. We need to do it because Africa...
Somebody should tell that to Nigeria.
Look, the foreigners who came last week, they said, hey man, the average age is only 18 or 19 years of age in Africa. America is old, man. We're 36 years of age, the average age. This is where the growth is. You can leapfrog. You can do M-Pesa, as you know, in Kenya. Mobile money, technology can certainly help Africa leapfrog some of the old technologies. So the guys are actually positive. But then they look at the visa program. They say, yes, Mr. Ramaphosa, President Ramaphosa has come out with great statements, but has the visa program changed? Some of the guys came, they had to still fill out these long birth certificate forms for the children.
So there's no implementation on that 50-point plan program.
How do you say, man? Aish, you know, the problem really, man, my friend, is until we wake up and smell the coffee, we have to make other bold decisions. I think the taxes also, there is a challenge with the taxes. We are not that competitive. Between you and me, East Africa is more appealing on the tax front. There are many emerging markets right now getting lots of flows. Brazil, other places that are turning around. Brazil had many problems, but they're getting quite a lot of FDI in. The problem really for us is, do we have to wait and wait until the election is over? It seems like we are often waiting.
Ultimately, you manage money, you allocate money to different markets depending on the risk level that you associate with those markets. How's your risk appetite? How are you looking at EMs? And particularly, how or which sectors would you be looking at in terms of South Africa?
Well, it's a very good question. Year to date, the emerging markets are up 11% almost on the broad index. unfortunately, South Africa is actually dragging the index down, man. This is the problem. So as a patriotic South African, I still travel around with a South African passport, even though I have a bit of an American accent. It's tough because the guys are saying, hang on, but China, Brazil, these other markets...
You're getting this phenomenal growth returns.
Yeah, and the problem is that overseas, you know how it is with foreign investors, they look at these headline numbers, unemployment, they look at the GDP growth, and they say, where is the momentum in South Africa? And unfortunately, the newspapers and the media, even though we are part of the media here, they are reporting news like Old Mutual's latest numbers.
Yeah.
And all the recent financial data coming out, including people like Aspen, Standard Bank, Sanlam, the numbers are struggling. I think a Group 5 filed for bankruptcy today.
Yeah.
So
tell me about it. You're keeping abreast.
So they say, but come on, what kind of construction industry is here in Group 5?
But the South African construction growth story, I mean, has been dead ever since the false political promises. And I only go as far back as President Jacob Zuma saying that he will unleash an infrastructure fund after the World Cup, which never materializes. So the construction sector on its own in South Africa is not that attractive. But what is? Do we have green shoots?
Well, you do. There's a lot of guys overseas who want to help on education, they want to help on housing, they want to help actually in financial services. You have this 4 or 5 big banks, but there are some of these new digital and online banks coming, which is actually very, very exciting, from Discovery, from some of the other guys, the Australian bank. I think that will shake it up a little bit. Capitec has actually shaken up the banking industry.
What about the energy space? I mean, renewable energy programs in South Africa have become very political, with most of the union and union bodies coming on the side, in fact, going very much against. I guess the trust levels between society and government is starting to show. And when you think about South Africa's recent past of state capture and that kind of narrative, I mean, even Cyril Ramaphosa mentioned such at the YPO Edge event. Are you worried about how South Africans look at foreign investors with a bit of apprehension and the trust levels are as weak as they are? I
understand that locals here do get upset that foreigners seem to turn on a dime and rush for the exits. The truth is, Moody's hasn't downgraded South Africa yet, so we've actually still in most of the global bond indexes. You know, the worst part that could happen for us if Moody's actually give us a downgrade in the next year, this would really be a terrible wake-up call, because about 100 billion rand would have to flow out of the country. The rand would suffer massively, interest rates would go up. So actually things aren't as bad. Are you worried about it as a fund manager? Do you think it could happen? Do you think Moody's could? What is a little strange between you, me, and the four walls? It's a bit strange that S&P and Fitch downgraded us some time back, and they've held that decision. They've given us the benefit of the doubt. They've been very kind to us. So we actually have to thank Moody's. Otherwise, we would have had a huge outflow. So, you know, the truth is there are always two sides to every story. I'm actually positive that there are some green shoots. You could argue South Africa at the moment, with some of the problems we've talked about, the financial results, it can only go up. The GDP growth could basically, from the next 2 years on the budget, go up by double. So they've been saying that for a while. We've been living in a very, very flat returns, if any at all. But I'll go with you are the man with the BDI on the money. Ultimately, Anthony, I want to know this. The world feels to me like it's full of political risk. You look at the bigger narrative, if you will, China and the US and the trade tensions that they're going through. Sure, Donald needs a deal, and we are hoping that this need will drive the deal for the sake of global growth. Anyway, you look at the UK, for instance, former Barclays chairperson says the UK is uninvestable right now because of Brexit. Europe is not any better, but it's the single biggest trading bloc there is in the single biggest market. But, you know, where does money go in this time of political instability and how politics has infiltrated the markets? Well, guess what? Money's going to Mozambique and Sierra Leone and Ethiopia. Why is it going? Because they've got solar energy plans in Rwanda as well, in Mozambique, in Sierra Leone. I have friends who are investing in solar and other energy projects in those countries, even mining. But here our mining policy, I don't know what the latest is. You know, it's flavor of the month sometimes. So the foreigners don't feel that there's a consistent policy. I think, honestly, we could have a lot more incentives to attract foreign investors. But foreign investors come in typically on the backs of other locals being positive. And when they see that the GDP growth is so low and the locals aren't investing, they actually take their cues, Grubber, often from the locals. If the locals are positive, man, the president, his heart is in the right place. That's what I heard from all my fellow executives at this YPO event. They actually felt sorry for President Ramaphosa because they feel that one guy can't do it all. He needs to, we learn about leadership at these CEO events. He needs to build a really strong team. We're all crossing our fingers, holding thumbs that after the election he builds a great team of both cabinet members and also ambassadors globally who can take the baton forward. As I say, I'm a loyal South African. I don't even know who the ambassador is in Washington, D.C., man. So I'd like to help the country. These envoys you've got, Trevor Manuel and other good guys, Jacques Marie, they're all smart guys. I'm sure we can help them. We can open up some doors. And there are wonderful returns to be made in Africa.